This recording will go over organization, note-taking, and developing study skills. Good study skills involve time management and discipline. Usually, studying should be incorporated into a daily routine. That's the reason why we did our study calendars that included our life obligations, whether it be your own sports, your kids' sports, religious obligations. It could have included your self-care routines. But what we want to do is take a look at how much time we have in a day and where we can allot specific time to prepare for this course and your other courses in nursing. And it's really important that you have studying as part of your daily routine. I like to say the most important time for you to look at content is the same day that it was presented. So like maybe on after a foundations class, that evening, even though you're exhausted, you sat through a 3-hour class plus whatever else you had going on, it's nice to revisit the material that same day because you'll have a better understanding if you start reviewing it the same day that you had class. And when it comes to organization, that obviously is an important role for effective studying. So you need to ask yourself, what are you doing to stay organized for class, lab, and clinical? And it's best if you can be organized out the gate instead of midway through the semester having a bazillion loose papers for your lab and trying to keep it in order in a book bag. So think about what works for you, whether it's notebooks or binders. Do you have dividers? How are you separating your lab paperwork from your clinical paperwork? Because just staying organized is going to be a key to your success. So if we go back and look at your calendars that you made that you submitted for your week 1 assignments, all in all, I thought they looked pretty good. A lot of people, they were very complete. Some people had different techniques, maybe color coding and using a key, and that's all fine because you're going to do what works for you. But review your study calendars as you're going forward and make sure there's not things that you've forgotten to list. Like maybe your kid has practice every Monday through Wednesday and you didn't put it on there. Maybe you have obligations every Sunday that weren't listed. Maybe you didn't include just some self-care time, just a block of time for you to do whatever it is that helps you provide self-care for yourself and relax and cope with the stressors that go on in life. So make sure that your calendar is complete and really fully represents all your obligations in life. I think you guys did really good at having class, lab, clinical assignments, and exams listed. Most people had work and sports down. Does your study time include the amount of time you will study and what content you plan to study? That was missing a little bit, and that's okay. You can tweak it going forward. What I would recommend is, so instead of on Monday having writing on it study, and Wednesday study, Thursday, Friday study, like how many hours are you planning on studying those days? Really make a commitment to yourself and a plan to block off the time that you're going to schedule to study rather, and then go a step further and plan out what content you're going to study on those days. So maybe you'll have Monday, Wednesday, and Friday you're studying clinical judgment for an hour, and then every day of the week for an hour or two you're studying foundations. You could break it down even more. Let's say foundations has a topic that you're really struggling with. You would allot more time to that foundations topic than to an easier foundations topic that's also being covered that week. So does that make sense? We really want to try and be specific with our times. Also, don't forget to leave yourself a little wiggle room. So if you wrote down that you're studying, we'll just make it easy, 10 hours per week, give yourself another little slot of 2 to 4 hours a week that you have available if you need it, because inevitably something will happen that will throw a wrench in your study plans. You'll get sick, you'll have to pick up for work for whatever reason, classroom schedule, something moves that you weren't expecting, kids get sick. So make sure you have a little extra time planned in for emergencies. Have your calendar available for easy updates. Be looking at it daily and assessing how you're doing. Track whether you're achieving your study plan. So it's not unusual for this first calendar that you make to look at it and be like, whoa, either I planned way too much or way too little study time. And that's fine. It's meant to be tweaked as you go forward. And make sure that you're including those self-care activities, whatever it is that you can add in weekly to help you care for yourself. All right, your textbook goes over some smart study habits. We'll just, you can look at your textbook, chapter 2, and we'll also cover them here. First one, plan specific times for studying. So that we already talked about with our calendars. 2, try not to do too much studying at one time. As we progress through the class, there is one technique, the Pomodoro technique, that we'll explore to see if that helps you with sort of breaking up study time. But you know, have you ever gotten to the point where you're reading and rereading and reading the same paragraph over and over again, and it's just not sticking? So it's not effective studying. We want to try and avoid that. Set goals for your study time. We've talked about that with the calendar. Avoid procrastination. Well, throughout the semester, talk about tips for avoiding procrastination. Study when you're alert. Find a special study place that's free of distractions. Can be hard for our parents in the course, but you want to try and be able to not be distracted when studying. Seek help when you don't understand the material. All of your instructors have office hours, and most nursing instructors will meet with you outside of office hours to help you out if you're struggling with a concept. Plan breaks. Eat a healthy diet and exercise and get sleep. Those 3 are really undervalued in terms of contributing to your success as a nursing student. Next, listening skills. So there's some things you can do throughout the program that'll help improve your chances for getting better grades and learning the content that you need to know, all that good stuff. So listen for verbal indicators such as, you need to know this, or you'll see this again, and the big one, you may see this on the NCLEX. That's your instructor telling you, hey, if you're starting to fall asleep, wake up. This is a big topic that you should be listening to. Make a note of content being covered during lecture. The instructor is not going to have time to cover every topic from every chapter of your textbook. So your instructor is going to focus on the need to know content. You got to know it. So that's the stuff you should be making notes of so that when you go to study, you know where the instructor had his or her focus. Give the instructor your full attention. Please silence your phones, take off any smartwatches, and try to really commit yourself from the time that you're in the classroom to your instructor. And pay attention to handouts or what is written on the board or part of PowerPoints. Next, we talk about effective note-taking. You want to come to class prepared, have notes and questions ready. Ideally, you will have read the textbook, made any notes that you had while studying on your own, and have questions ready for the instructor. You'll have another video on note-taking that will talk about some different strategies for taking notes. You can use shorthand or abbreviation. Review notes after class. So I said a big thing is studying that same day that you have a lecture. You could use the instructor PowerPoints and print them out and take notes if the instructor is using PowerPoints. The ATI Systems Disorder Template, that's once you get into the ATI product, it's something you could print out, just sort of like a map for taking your notes for different disorders, or you can do an old-fashioned outline. Just going to have to figure out what it is that works for you. Ideally, you're reading your chapters before it's being presented in class. It's easy to come in cold to class, listen to an instructor, and think, yeah, that makes sense. And then you go home, you don't study that night. Later that week, you go to look at the content, and you're like, what? None of this makes sense. So if you come in prepared, you're going to take away more from that classroom lecture. Highlight any important information when studying, what you think is important, and then after lecture you can compare that to what the instructor presented as important. And then jot down any questions you have so you can ask those questions during lecture. The majority of your textbook have resources. Now I don't think that your Caputi Clinical Judgment textbook has any online resources, but like your Foundations textbook, your adult health textbooks, those textbooks have a couple different things you can use. One, on the inside cover, there's a code to access the online resources. Those are really good. A lot of times they'll give you the answers to the in chapter, the questions within the chapter, may have additional practice questions or case studies that can be helpful when you're studying. And then in addition to the online textbook resources, for foundations, pharmacology, adult health, you'll have like a cardboard insert that came in your book bundled with a code, and that code's for the EAQ product, which is like an adaptive quizzing product. So if you haven't accessed it yet, that's fine, but make sure you don't ever throw away anything that came with your book bundle, because you will be required to access that in the near future, and those are great products for practice questions. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about breaking down NCLEX style questions and also rewording NCLEX style questions. There you go, I updated it with the rewording. So let's start with breaking down the NCLEX style question. So a question has a stem, multiple distractors usually, and a correct answer. So to really simplify it, we'll make a question of which fruit is orange. So the question, that's the stem, basically, is the question. Which fruit is orange? If your questions are A, B, C, D, and the answer options, if the answer options are A, B, C, and D, and the options are banana, grape, strawberry, or orange, obviously the correct answer is D, orange. Banana, grape, and strawberry are the distractors. The difference between a question like that and NCLEX style questions, and I'm sure you've heard it, is a lot of times the answer options seem like they could all be right. So you hear a lot of students say, I picked the right answer, but not the most right one. That's really not correct, because there's only one correct answer. So part of what we get into when we get more into the test taking strategies is how do you pick out the right answer when they all seem right? Another thing you're going to practice this week is rewording NCLEX style questions. So when you read an NCLEX style question, sometimes they're really long. So like a big scenario, you got a patient, this is their history, this is how they currently present, here's their vitals, here's their complaints, here's some labs, and then you get a question about them. So when you get those types of questions, you want to start simplifying those into your own words and really simplifying what the question is asking. And that alone can sometimes help you with some test taking strategies. Maybe you get it down and you say, what's the priority problem for a patient with respiratory issues? And you've identified they're looking for the priority. Then you can bring in your test taking strategies for prioritization questions. So we'll be doing some practicing on simplifying questions into your own words. All right, so we're going to look at a question and break down the different parts of it, as well as simplify it, reword the question. So the question says, the nurse is caring for a client after a bowel resection. They note the client's restless. The nurse takes the client's vital signs and notes that the pulse rate has increased and the blood pressure has dropped significantly since the previous readings. The nurse suspects that the client is going into shock and would take which immediate action? So you get a pretty good description of what's going on with the patient. But in terms of breaking down the question, we'll start with that. So what's the question? The nurse suspects the client's going into shock. What action would they take immediately? And we'll simplify that in a little bit. But so that's what we're worried about. What are we going to do? You have answers A, B, C, and D. For time's sake, I'm not going to go through each one. But basically, 3 of those are incorrect. Those are your distractors. And 1 is your correct answer. So before picking out a correct answer, you, the student, would want to read the question and reword the question in your own words to make it more simplified for you. An example of rewording this one, the end says it pretty good. What is your immediate concern for a client who's going into shock? And as we go through and learn our test-taking strategies, that word immediate is a key word here that gives us a clue as to how to answer this question correctly. I'm not going to overwhelm you with all that now. This week, we're going to focus on practicing some rewording of questions. No right or wrong answer. You're just going to put the question, what you think the main basis is of what the question's asking in your own words. And we're also, I don't think we're going to the more I think about it. You want to be able sort of to, if I say that that's a distractor, you just want to be able to understand that that would be an incorrect answer option. But that's really it for this week's lesson.